Hi, and welcome to my channel where I make dishes inspired by some of my favorite video game characters. Today's dish is inspired by Junko Enoshima from the Danganronpa series. When I was first playing through Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, like everyone else, I started developing my favorites early on from the first impressions from each character. I loved the designs of all of the characters, some more than others, and thought Junko's character design was so cool. I remember talking to her on the first free time that I could because I was so intrigued. She was a character with such promise and intrigue that I remember thinking that she was going to be alive for at least most of the game. Boy, was I wrong, because I was shell-shocked when she was killed so quickly. At least, that's what we were all made to think. Of course, the twist later on that Junko Enoshima was actually alive, and the true mastermind all along, was surprising. But I remember feeling some sort of vindication that she did indeed end up playing a big role. Our Miss Ultimate Des-Pear is definitely iconic for a reason, with her multiple twisted personalities and her unbelievable desire for despair at all costs. Junko is responsible for the biggest, most awful, most tragic event in human history after all, but I can't help but find her so cool at the same time. Of course, in a world where she didn't actually create such awful destruction. I could claim that a lot of deep thought went into Junko's inspired dish. I could say that I racked my brain for a long time, and I really debated what ingredients suited her best. I could tell you the dish and say, she seems like she likes sweets but doesn't want them to be too heavy, so she'd probably lean towards a fruity dessert. I could say that this dish sounds so fancy in its name, and so Junko would be drawn towards it. And I could say that she would feel like an ultimate queen if one of her Ultimate Des-Pear members made and fed her this dish. All of those statements would be partially true. But ultimately, I just have to admit that we are making a Des-Pear Tarte Tatin for Junko because despair. Here's what you'll need to make the biggest, most awesome, most epic dessert in kitchen history. 4 pears, granulated sugar, water, unsalted butter, lemon juice, vanilla ice cream or whipped cream to serve, and 1 sheet of puff pastry. If you are making your own puff pastry, you'll need unsalted butter at room temperature, all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, salt, and sour cream. If you're making your own puff pastry, start with this first. You'll begin by grabbing 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter and cutting it into small cubes. Once the butter is cut, let it come to room temperature. Then grab a large bowl and add in 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of granulated sugar, and a half teaspoon of salt. Whisk everything so it's well distributed. Then once your butter is finally at room temperature, add it into the bowl and use a pastry cutter, fork, or your hands to work the butter into the flour mixture until the butter breaks into small pea-sized pieces. We'll then add in a 1/4 cup of sour cream and stir it in with a fork. As the dough starts to form, create a ball and then start to flatten it into a circular disc. Once you have a disc of dough, wrap it up with plastic wrap and then place it in your fridge to chill for at least 1 hour before using. Once your puff pastry is chilled, we can start to make the main attraction. Wash and grab your pears and then slice them into 1/8 wedges so you have 8 slices per pear. Set the pears aside for later, then preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. We're heading to the stovetop next, and you're going to need a 10-inch oven-proof skillet, preferably a cast iron pan. You'll add in a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and 2 tablespoons of water and stir both together. We'll set the heat to medium and cook without stirring until the mixture starts to become more golden in color. This should take around 6 minutes, give or take. Once golden, add in 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter and stir it in as it melts, continuing to stir occasionally until the mixture becomes golden once again. At this point, we'll add in 2 teaspoons of lemon juice and again stir this in, and then we'll add in our pear slices. Feel free to style the pears however you would like, but place the pears around until most areas of the sugar are covered by the pears. As the pears cook, we'll reduce the heat to medium-low and cook for about another 3 to 5 minutes until the pears are tender. We'll then turn off the heat. We'll grab our cooled pastry dough now, and if it's homemade, we'll roll it out until it's about a 12-inch diameter circle. We'll place the pastry dough over the pears in the skillet and gently tuck the edges inside the edges of the pan using a fork or rubber spatula. Make sure to be careful since the skillet will still be very hot. We can then place the tart into the oven to bake for about 30 to 40 minutes until the pastry is cooked to a nice golden brown. Once removing the pan from the oven, we'll let it cool for about 15 minutes before doing anything to it. After 15 minutes, run a knife along the edges of the pastry to help make it easier to release from the pan. Grab a serving plate or baking sheet, just something that's larger than the pan, and place it on top of the pan. Carefully, you'll invert the tart onto the plate. As you remove your pan, if there are any pears stuck, simply remove them and place them back onto the tart. From here, we can serve by itself or with ice cream or whipped cream and enjoy. This tart is so homey and delicious, and I ate so much of it too quickly. Anything with baked puff pastry is always an A+ dish in my mind, especially when served a la mode with some melting ice cream. The pastry is so buttery and flaky, and the pears are so soft and tender. The light caramelization that accompanies the dessert is so enjoyable on your tongue, and as I said, it's so hard to stop yourself at just one slice. Just like in the game, I can see Junko's eyes become glazed over with that despair swirl as she looks at this dessert. So full of delicious despair, it makes her tingle. What a dish so fitting of the ultimate despair. She could enjoy lots of it without ruining her fashionista figure, and eating all of it would also provide others with the despair she craves. Junko definitely seems the kind to be too good for baking or cooking herself, so she would only be able to enjoy it if someone else made it for her, like her sister Mukuro. Maybe that's another layer of despair for her, that she craves delicious sweets like this, but doesn't have the skill or ability to make her own whenever she wants. Either way, you can't deny that life with Junko is never dull, especially if she's just been given a tart like this from one of her devoted followers. The recipe card is in the video description if you'd like a more quick and concise version to give it a try. Like if you want a bite, subscribe for more geeky treats, and comment what foods Junko reminds you of. Thanks for following along.